My name is Clara Lehman, and I live here in Helvetia, West Virginia.
And I'm Jonathan Lecoq, and I also live here in West Virginia.
I was born and raised here and then moved away for college, and we met in Minnesota, where we went to a small liberal arts school. And then we moved around a little bit and traveled and experienced some wanderlust. And then we moved back in 2012. Mm-hmm. So we've been living here since 2012.
My first introduction to Helvetia was, I would say 2000, the year 2000.
Yeah, for Fastnacht. Yeah. His experience was a big party and lots of people all at once.
Yeah, but I definitely was smitten with how kind everybody was, and it took a while to go from Chicago pace to Helvetia pace, And I remember it would almost take 2 to 3 days to kind of get to the Helvetia pace, which is really nice if you allow yourself to get to that pace.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Right. Thank you.
I think for me, I was homesick and felt that in Helvetia, especially in West Virginia, I could be more helpful than I could in a big city. And I was not that you get ignored, but that you are not making an impact like you do in a small village where you're needed. And so I just knew that I needed to come home. I missed the stars. You can't see the stars in a city. I missed the sound of the nature here, the birds and the river. And then I knew that in a way that I wanted to build a life that was simpler. And so that's what I needed to come back to.
I also have 2 immigrant parents, and both of them, particularly my mother, don't really get back to their home country very much. And so I think that inspired me to listen to Clara's desire to get back home and start a life where she wanted to be. But then once here, I fell in love with the pace for sure, the kindness. I think one thing, and this is one thing I tell my Chicago friends all the time, is what's beautiful about rural America, but certainly a culturally rich town like Helvetia, is you deal with everybody as friends and community members and neighbors, whether there's political, religious, or other differences, and we all kind of have a combined interest in the development and evolution of the town.
Yeah. Love you de la montaña.
Yes, I know that one.
Oh, we have the words.
So that was something that I think particularly struck me about Helvetia, which you don't get in the city. You can kind of hide and, I'm going to just hang out with the people that I know and feel comfortable with, whereas here we have to all be kind and friendly, and it's a really nice experience.
He's expressing his diplomacy and neutrality, much like Switzerland. I do think that small towns encourage that a little more, because you could be polarized and very different, but when your neighbor who needs a cup of sugar is on the other side of the aisle from you, maybe politically or religious or whatever, it's like you learn to forgive and be more open to their discussion or their conversation. Jonathan and I are wearing our traditional Swiss costumes that we traditionally would not wear these daily. So if you come visit, you won't expect to see us in these on a day-to-day basis. But I think that there are integrations that we're holding on to out of fear of loss of identity. And these outfits are a way for us to celebrate that identity on special occasions and at the fair or at Fasnacht. I think what you'll find is that maybe we've lost the language and maybe we've lost some of the very, cursory things, but winemaking, food, dancing, things that kind of you can put yourself into have been retained.
When the original settlers came, almost every family made Helvetia cheese. And it was all pretty much the same recipe. And it was a common everyday thing for all the families to make cheese. They all had their own cows. And then it went to actually the Bali family, which we have Roseanne and Alex here today. And for several years, they were the only family that made cheese in the area. And they had their own cows, their own farm. They worked the farm until they got to the age that they could no longer do that.
These are my great aunts, and they were known for making Swiss cheese. And they had a sign on the gate and people would know to come and get Swiss cheese or eggs or butter. And this is their picture. And this is one of them cutting this cheese.
After that, due to law change in the state, it became very hard to legally make cheese and sell it because the regulations were so tough. Then in the 1990s, there was some changes made in the legislature, and they changed the law specifically for Helvetia cheese. And now the law does permit us to make a certain amount of cheese every year and sell it. And it can be made in our own kitchen, which we do here in our home. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, my husband retired, and I was just a homemaker, so we tried to think of something that we would like to do. And I'm the one that came up with the cheese idea and thought that, that this is something that's died out in our community, and I'd like to bring that back. I love history. I love our history. And so we kind of attempted to make several different types of cheese, but I knew I wanted to make the same recipe that came with our ancestors from Switzerland. That was one of the cheeses that I wanted to make.
The sort of independent spirit of West Virginia, but Appalachia as well, seems to combine nicely with the spirit of Swiss culture, both in community work, but also in, hey, as long as I'm independently doing this and it's not harming anybody, there's some freedom with that.
I think West Virginians, and I would assume maybe Swiss people, are proud of being independent, but also there's like a rugged resilience that people admire about living here. Like, it takes an hour to get groceries, so you need to prepare. When there's a storm, you are self-sufficient in some ways, or you help your neighbor be self-sufficient by plowing their road for them. So I think that identity is embraced here, but it's really something that is necessary for the terrain as well. Definitely this community significantly embraces the identity. I mean, we have the flags of different cantons flying. You'll find that the buildings have shields on them with the cantons. So we have been intentional, and it has been very purposeful to hold on to that identity in a patriotic way in some ways. I think that maybe with immigration in the United States, we were told that we should become a melting pot. And I think Helvetia resisted that, and the Swiss who moved here resisted that very significantly. Now, everyone here would say, I'm American. But I think that they tried very hard to be like, well, I'm very proud of the positive parts of my Swiss identity, and I want to hold on to it. And so having these symbols that remind us who we are makes maybe the next generation want to explore it, even though we don't have a German-speaking citizen, or even though we may not be making raclette every holiday, I think there are things that they want to explore, and then the children can go and visit and learn the tradition of your country, and then hopefully bring back those to all of us, and it makes our life richer. So the cantons on the different buildings and within the village are mostly representative of trying to be diplomatic and include as many as we can within reason, but also the families choose to display the shields that are of their identity. So if someone is of Zurich descent, then they would have that canton. And then some folks really love the burned flag, so they're like, I'm gonna put up the bear. And maybe they aren't even Swiss. Some folks will like fly a symbol and they won't, but it represents for them Helvetia here in West Virginia. We're gonna make some signage that gives you more history. We're also doing a lot more like educational experiences within the event of Fastnacht, or whenever you come to Helvetia, so that you understand what does it mean, fasting night, and why do we celebrate it. I think the percentage of community members that have Swiss heritage has decreased. That's part of marrying. This is a Cuban Belgian and I'm Swiss American with some Irish and French background. But I think that we're probably around 60% have some Swiss ancestry, and then 40% are of a different heritage, but they've totally embraced the identity and love that it's got a unique quality to it. I think people choose this village for their home because of that.
Yeah, in the early winter of 1869, there were 14 male and 1 female Swiss people who had gotten together in New York City came. And they came in October without really having a house or anything here, but they made it through the winter in a 1-room log cabin. And then in the spring they sent back for their family and friends, but they had come as kind of to explore it and see if they could find an appropriate place.
When they came here, there was absolutely nobody living here. No one. There was, and it was a wilderness, an absolute wilderness. And they were not real pioneers like Daniel Boone or something. They were craftspeople. And it's like they came here in 1869 in October, right before the winter, in this wilderness. The closest people were up on Hicks Ridge. That's a long ways off, It just amazes me that they had to stick it out. They couldn't go back. There was no money to go back. But, that's pretty amazing.
There's a little bit of this evolution and mixing, and that's what it holds on to identity and tradition, is whenever you allow it to be open enough, but there's at least a little bit of a guide to be we're going to try Fastnacht and then bring in a New Orleans vibe, or things like that. So I think that's the goal, and to make sure it is changing with who we are. I think some people think we're a little weird, so weird is fun. And I think that Fallout 76 featured Fastnacht in their game. And what happened was they made a virtual community of Helvetia, and it's 1-to-1. So the Hütte and the Beekeeper Inn and the Swiss Root Store, they're all there, and you travel as a gamer through this village and fight radioactive Slavs and wear a mask for the Fastnacht moment. But that has encouraged a whole different generation or a whole different community to explore Helvetia, whereas there has been a community of people who have been exploring Helvetia for 50 years or have been coming for 50 years, and then they tell their friends, and then local West Virginians embrace the community readily. Also, we get from surrounding communities, but we get people from international countries, Germany, Switzerland, India. I mean, people come from all over because it's weird, it's different, it's weird, and I think they know maybe there's an authenticity to it that they're hoping to get. You take us as we are, and we present to you what we have, and we're a little broken, but hopefully you fall in love with us, and then you want to come back and support and participate.
Like I said, it takes a while. I can't even get started now. There you go. Almost. Once the roll slide.
hard to make money in Helvetia off of industries like coal and timber now. Those have been depleted a little bit. Timber is still thriving, but our local coal mine has closed down, and thus a lot of the folks that work there they drive now farther, 2 to 3 hours to get to their employment.
And I do think West Virginia is trying, because we've been a little behind in terms of like internet. And I think as we continue to develop that, I mean, more people like us will be able to come to this town and have this very quaint, unique lifestyle, but still be connected to the world and be able to work on many different types of jobs and projects.
Yeah, there are a lot of artisans too, and sometimes that means they mix their work where they're maybe working something that is a little more of a traditional hourly or salary, and then they do their art as well.
We want more families to come to Helvetia, so the internet is getting better. You can come live here and have
We have city water now, and we have our internet, and then right now we still don't have public service and septic and things like that, but we'll help you get into your homes and make sure you're cozy and comfortable.
Yeah.
So
well, and the school is 30 kids total, kindergarten through senior year, so you get that like private homeschool, very one-on-one style, but it's public education.
Yep.
That's our pitch.
I really don't want that authentic love for identity and what this place offers to be lost. And whether we become a little more Appalachian with some of our dance or our music, I don't mind that. I just don't want to lose the riches of like being proud of where you're from and seeing that international identity and not being isolated to an identity that is maybe narrow-minded or a little bit lost in something that isn't more worldly. And I think Helvetia, with its Swiss background, reminds you that you came here as a visitor or as a new person to a country that was basically mainly Native Americans and wilderness. It was very rugged, and we have to protect it and be stewards of it. And I hope that continues for generations. And I think to be a steward of Helvetia is to embrace that Swiss ancestry, but also to make sure we take care of the land that we are proud to be on.
I guess I have two hopes. One is that the community continues to grow. That means more people come who are willing to be active in community development and organizing. And then I think for the community, I hope that we can continue to find that balance between being forward-minded, but while holding on to history. Mm-hmm. Because that's often been, like when we are in community meetings, that's the conversation, usually subtext or full out of let's change and adapt to what's going on and modernize right now. And then there's often a hold of like, well, no, we've done it this way for 150 years, and finding a way to evolve without losing ourselves.
We're modernizing in a way that is intentional and careful without losing some of this like calm, slow that is important for generations like ours today. Schweizerdeutsch has been lost in the community as far as, I think the last remaining citizen that knew that language died about 7 years ago. However, we would love for the embassy to encourage us to learn and relearn the language, so we'll take anything we can.
So there's a sign across the street from the Hütte that's by the poet Joubert, and it says something like, "You'll find poetry nowhere unless you bring some with you." And I really love that as this sort of like welcome message to the town, where it's if you're coming with an expectation to take something or have some sort of intense experience, you may be disappointed, but at the same time, come to be part of it, if that makes sense. So yes, the pace is slow, but there's still a lot of opportunity to build relationships and have experiences that will be meaningful to you if you have that openness.
When you have 60 to 100 people who are successfully holding on to tradition in this village, that means that it could inspire you to go home and practice that in your community. don't lose like some of the traditions that are special, and embrace the positive ones and do away with the bad ones. And I think that that's okay. You should be the commander of your community's identity and embrace that very wholeheartedly, because that's what we do every day. And you'll see that there are probably about 50 champions in Helvetia that are holding on to identity really carefully, and so you must do that in your home too. So I hope that that inspires you.
When I hear Swiss Impact, I think of a culture and region that has evolved and transitioned to other parts of the world, but still brought some of the history and like morals and values of the region to these other places. And so the impact is very much in staying true to yourself while building relationships wherever you go.
Yeah, I think that Swiss Impact means a lot because of the fact that Switzerland has had a very long history of being a successful diplomatic country that people admire. And when you say I'm of Swiss descent or I am Swiss, I think that people are very curious, but also they have a lot of respect for that country. And I think that helps Helvetia. It helps us be, we are a spider web of communities that have been impacted by that heritage, that history, and that goodwill that Switzerland has across the world. And so we want to reflect that as readily as we can, so that then it continues to be an impact that is positive and actually making a difference in a way that hopefully Switzerland's proud of, but that all countries start to bring that into their persona and the way they approach the world, because we're kind of getting smaller as we get more and more connected.
You're alone.